Hello and welcome to our webinar. My name is Corinne Barker, SSATB's Senior Director of Professional Development, and I will be moderating today's session. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today entitled Sprint or Marathon? How are you running your admission office? And I'd like to extend a very special thank you to our presenter today, Katherine Hay, the Associate Director of Admission at Trinity Prep School in Winter Park, Florida. Because we have so many participants today, all the attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. But we do want to hear your questions, so please use the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel to ask any questions that you may have throughout the session. At the conclusion of the remarks, Katherine will answer those questions and we'll finish those at the end. This webinar is also being recorded and will be made available online on the admission.org's webinar page. And now I'd like to welcome Katherine. Please be patient while I give her controls of the webinar screen. All right, Katherine, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Corinne. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to sit with me this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you hail from, to talk about sprint or marathon. How are you running your admission office? So I am Katherine Hay. I have been in admissions now for going on 7 years. My entire family is in private school education, which is kind of how I got into this myself. So my mom worked in admissions for 25 years as director up north. My dad worked at a boarding school. I grew up at one, and then I transitioned myself into the field. I worked at St. James School outside of Hagerstown, Maryland for 3 years as associate director, and then decided to try admission in a day school setting and came down to Florida at Trinity, and I love it, especially right now where it is not 1 degree, which I heard it was back home earlier this morning. So thank you for joining me. Our first slide here might represent how many of you feel at this time of the year. It is an incredibly busy season. It is much longer than it used to be. There is so much going on right now. And fortunately, I think for a lot of us, these papers are now more online, but there are no fewer of them. There are still just as many things to do, and I think a lot of us feel the way she looks. Just a little bit of background about Trinity's first month back from winter break. We had, we had 3 open house events, 3 visitations, student shadow days. We had 3 committee meetings and hosted 2 standardized testing events, 2 ICs on campus. So it does seem like everything kind of hits all at once. And that's all on top of the interviews, any kind of contract revisions, and just regular school activities like your advisory, if you're coaching or anything like that. So just so many things going on at once. And the most important thing to remember as you approach this season, as you stay on top of everything, is to plan. So what we do, and what we will probably do in just about a month and a half or so, is sit down as a team and go over this past year. And we will look towards next fall, and we'll start planning out how to plan, essentially. We'll plan to plan. So we get on our calendar all of our meetings for the coming year, our weekly meetings, our planning meetings for all of our events, things like that. In order to kind of go over all of that, we took a 30,000-foot perspective. We wanted to really revisit our objective. We had a lot of change this year. We have a new director of marketing, and we have a new building on campus, so we had to redefine how we were going to appeal to families when the marketing component wasn't so much in our office. It transitioned just down the hall. And then also our format itself changed because of all of the construction, the parking, the facilities, and all of that. So we decided to take a step back and say, how are we going to accomplish all of this? So we know what our purpose is, but let's re-articulate it to ourselves and define our objective. So the obvious answer is to fill your seats with mission-appropriate students. But what exactly does that mean? What is your school's mission? How does that resonate with your office? So Trinity's mission statement is to develop individuals who will excel in college and in life, contribute to their communities, lead in a changing society, and grow spiritually. So I'm sure that many of you have similar mission statements that all, it represents how you feel about your school and your students. But it's important to figure out how you in the admission office connect directly to the words that specifically define your school. So then, going from that, narrowing it down, so getting from that 30,000-foot perspective down, you do kind of want to get into the weeds a little bit, but you need to be able to ask the right questions. So, for example, articulating the questions that you need to ask. What does a successful student look like for your school? What does it mean when a student is a good fit? And how do you know that? So one thing that we did recently was to talk to our college guidance office, about the profiles of students that were accepted at, various schools around the country. And we then compared those students to their entry data, and looked at their incoming scores, their grades, their teacher recommendations, all kinds of things that were indicators for success. If there were anything, any pieces that maybe stood out as flags, and how did all of that play out while the student was here at Trinity, given the resources that they had. Finding these students, it depends on, sort of the area that you're in. So do you have gifted programs around you? Do you start in pre-K, or do you start in middle school? We start in 6th grade. So what kind of feeder schools do you have? Things like that. Do you have sport camps on campus? Do you have gifted programs, that utilize your facilities? Trinity rents the auditorium out. We rent our classrooms. We rent our sport fields. And not only is this really great exposure for us, it is a good source of revenue, things like that. It's a kind of an extension of our marketing office. So when you're going back to the start, so after you've figured out, a successful profile of your student here at your school, when you're looking at the front end again, and you're looking to assess the students coming through your doors, testing and grades are, again, kind of obvious answers for that. And you'll find that sweet spot, if you haven't already, of the testing range and the type of transcript that works at your school. But then the interview is a really fun way to, draw them out a little bit more. And so we revised our interview process this year. And, for example, one of the questions that we started asking was, what color best describes your personality and why? And I got some really cool answers to that question. Everything from, well, I'm a rainbow, and here's why. Or I would say black because it is what it is, and there's no variation of black. You can't have different shades of black, things like that. Maybe asking them, what is a challenge that you faced? Or do you have any kind of life advice? Pieces that will draw them out a little bit more. You can engage with them. Occasionally I'll ask them to define the purpose of an interview, and then certainly not being confrontational, but disagree a little bit, and challenge their answer and see how they respond to that. and what they say when they're kind of put on the spot to offer a different answer. Group dynamics. Trinity has quite a number of applications from siblings, and so we in the admission office have just 2 of us that do the interviews for the school, and so it would be quite a strain on us if we were also interviewing the siblings. So given that the family is a known entity, we have our faculty interview them in a group setting. We feel that we don't need to re-interview the parent, and this has been enormously helpful for us, but also very informative because the teachers have a really great perspective on the kids and the way they relate to each other. We'll often get very humorous feedback about the way the kids ask each other questions or things like that. Occasionally we'll get a piece of feedback that will cause us to look more closely or follow up, but generally on the whole, it's been a really great experience for us. So matching mission-appropriate students to your school while considering all of these enrollment issues. So this complicates the admission process, just by way of keeping a healthy balance. And there are many people who have interest in the admission process, whether they are alums or coaches or teachers, current parents, board members. A lot of people, have something to say about some of the candidates. And as valuable as it is, as helpful as it is, it's important to make sure that you're staying true to the students, that are the right fit, that you're able to offer a balance, but making sure that you have the students that are the right fit. So, given everything, that goes on and all of the challenges faced and the busy time of year, keeping everything in mind, what we at Trinity did was to create a strategic plan that we felt helped us, live into our admission office mission statement, but then also really plan to implement it and to, realize it and to see its effects. So our admission office mission statement is that the admission office serves the school by managing school enrollment and admitting mission-appropriate students who will contribute to the academic success of the school and support the programs offered. So this mission statement to Trinity, it probably sounds fairly generic, but for us it's very personal because each word was chosen carefully by Patty, Sherry, and myself. And it was really a great team-building exercise. We were able to sit down together, the 3 of us, and just hash this out in kind of a bigger thinking process. It was a departure from our weekly sort of task-oriented, calendar review, and we were able to bounce ideas off each other and pick the words that we felt really carried weight. And, and support the programs offered. For example, just that line that really resonates with me because I'm visualizing the programs offered here and, the ones that we're supporting. And it would resonate differently for all of you as well. So going from there, we then very candidly took a summary of status, of where we were right at the moment. So getting down from that overarching statement, we looked at where we were in relation to where we wanted to be. So we acknowledged that although our processes are, thankfully, and largely online, they are kind of disjointed, and we didn't like the way things were not flowing quite as smoothly. We really wanted to make things a more seamless process for our families, but also for us on our end, because there's been quite a lot of maintenance with the different modules that we have, making sure that they connect, that they speak to each other, that we're not duplicating information unnecessarily. We also said that we are a little too reliant on printed materials. As a school, we're moving more and more towards all online communications, things like that. So in looking at this, we did feel that there were things that we could successfully move to having more online and getting away from that. So it's really important to be transparent and completely honest in this process. Not at all critical. It's just an opportunity to recognize areas of growth, almost as we might respond to a parent, in terms of just areas of growth for your child. And then just as a side note, towards the bottom, we talk about being seen in the community, which is just really, really important. Trinity students participate throughout the year, every year, on Habitat Homes. We have advisories that go every single weekend, so it's an all-school event. That's something that we're kind of known for locally. And then just beyond that, administrators and teachers are getting out and writing articles for, local magazines or things like that, just about, providing advice for teaching or classroom management or parent relations, things like that. So that part of it is really important as well. Going then from where we were at the time to where we wanted to be. So because our processes we felt were kind of disjointed, we wanted to look more at our technology and really find ways of getting to where we wanted to be, that would free up more of our time, that wouldn't require parents. So for example, right now, when a parent applies, they create an admission account for the application, and they have a password and a user ID and all of that. Once a student is about to enroll and accept our offer of admission, they then have to create an entirely different account with a new user ID, a new password, and then for the enrollment portion of the tuition, they then have a third through the company that manages that for us. So that's the kind of thing that we would like to streamline, and that's what we're looking at. And fortunately, by revising our communications, condensing some of the information, things like that, I think we have been able to make it as smooth for our parents as possible. Also just being available as an office, and having our technology office available for any kinds of glitches that may occur within those 3 transitions, things like that. It's gone pretty well, but it could be better. We also would like to increase the number of candidates entering our 6th grade, particularly by identifying areas of growth. And at least specific to this area of Florida, just outside of Orlando, we have some areas of high growth right now. It's called Medical City and Lake Nona, so there are lots of families moving into the area, doctors looking to send their kids to a private school. So that's an area for us to target with our marketing and our messaging. We have been able to maintain a high yield rate with a very low attrition rate, which is something that helps us in our communications with parents. Sometimes I'll get asked in interviews about reasons that a student might leave Trinity, and I'm able to then verbalize some of that, but then also come back and talk to them about the fact that we have such a low attrition rate and what that says about the way the school is able to live into its mission, with families on a regular basis. And because of all this, this contributes to why we can smile through our admission season. We all talk to each other. We are a team. We help each other, but it's really this, perspective and this adhering to these larger goals through these smaller steps that we implemented that really helps. I should also mention that we did, after the intentions, we did stipulate our goals as well in a 3-year format. So we had goals for this current year, for next year, and then the year after. And for this year, one of our goals was to evaluate web-enabled admission modules and adapt our admission and enrollment documents to be accessed easily via mobile devices. To do that, we wanted to work with our technology department to preview options, collect prospective sibling data, things like that. And we actually did that yesterday, and we have one scheduled to do next month as well. Another goal was to plan and execute new admission information programs to include use of tablets for tour guides. We have been really, really fortunate to have a really strong base of parent volunteers who give our tours, and they do a fantastic job. They are all equipped with a detailed tour script, which is a few pages long. Many of them have it memorized, but it would be helpful if they could, take notes right on their tablet, or highlight words, or link out to the website while walking around the school to, read verbatim to a parent what our dress code is, things like that, or any particular question that they might have. So that was the thought process behind that. We did have a beta test earlier in the year. We had a few glitches with the tablet. It wasn't quite as user-friendly. We didn't use an iPad. We had a different model. But going forward, that is still something that we would like to look into, providing that we had the budget available. Another goal is to collaborate with our Director of Marketing and Communications. So if you have one, this is really important, as you know, to ensure that the school is being represented in a way that you feel is appealing to your best fit students, the applicants that you would like to draw from. As I said, we have a new individual in this role this year, and so she meets weekly for an hour with Sherry, our Director of Admission. And this is just as important as the weekly meetings that we have with our head of school and with each other as an office. And then just briefly, our goals for next year are to transition to a new database if what we've reviewed this year we feel pans out, to further evaluate our admission program to determine viability with a new facility. We have a brand new middle school being built, and it's going to be amazing. It's 2 stories. It's our first and only 2-story building. It has a beautiful view of the lake. It really is going to be a very impressive space, and we would love to have our admission events there. That would be a really, really wonderful way to showcase the building and the school. And then, just to continue the integration with the marketing department, things like that. And then our goals for 2016, 2017 are really more based on how the goals for this year wrap up and then how the goals for next year pan out. So those will be built off of that as well. And then kind of just some of the nitty-gritty details that make all of this possible. So organization, as you all know, is just as important as having that huge perspective. And really, there's no efficiency unless those two kind of dovetail. So as I mentioned, as an office, we do meet for 2 hours every Monday. Sometimes we use the full 2 hours, sometimes we don't, but we have that time on the calendar, which we get on the calendar, even before the summer starts. So we know that we'll be meeting. We have a shared office calendar that we list all of our major events on. We get them on the all-school calendar, right around the spring break time. That way, we're able to reserve facilities. We're able to contact the faculty that we need, all of our volunteers, things for that. If you have anything that is repeating, like standardized testing or open houses, having bins that you can use and just pull these bins out and it'll have everything you need. So for standardized testing, we have in there tissues, we have pens and extra paper and just everything that we need for an IC, and we put all of the booklets and the answer sheets and the essay topics in there. And that way, and we store them in our closet. We pull them out when we get the new materials and update them, but then we can just grab a bin and go to our location. And we do that for our admission events this year in terms of our open houses as well. So we did have 10 this year, and that was to accommodate all of the parking on campus given the construction. And we had 2 last year. So the 2 open houses last year were really great in terms of the planning and things like that for the admission office. Because as you know, if you have 2 or 10, you still need to do the same type of prep work, things like that for it. So the events this year were much smaller, and so it facilitated the limited parking space much more easily, but there was a lot of the prep time for it. So we had to be really efficient in making sure that everything we needed for those 10 events was ready to go all the time. Everything from cupcakes from a bakery, to our parent tour guides, to our head of school, to picking up the balloons and the flowers and making sure that the coffee, was hot and ready to go, things like that. And so we really kind of got that down to a science. So generally, as I'm sure you all feel, you want to allow yourselves to be experts. And that comes with repetition and practice. So trying not to reinvent what is working well and only tweak what needs adjusting. So avoiding major overhauls, but that's exactly what we did, as I described to you, with our open house program. But that was born out of necessity. But the really, really great thing that was so positive about it was that because it was a much smaller event, it was capped at about 50 people rather than around 300, was that we were able to talk to every single person, not just every single family, but before the event started, and then afterwards when we had cupcakes and a time to wrap up with them at the end. They were able to talk to anyone in the admission office, the head of school, the middle school or upper school principal, the director of curriculum, something like that. So they really were able to have a very personalized experience. And so given that, we decided that 2 was too few, 10 was too many. So the just right solution for Trinity for next year is to have 5. And we're going to have those in our brand new building. But it was from this break from our intended philosophy, which is to revise what needs revising with an eye towards the future, but not throwing yourself off balance. But because we needed to do that, we wound up finding a very happy medium. And then, also evaluating. So not just, you evaluating yourselves and your process, which is what what you do when you create these larger mission statements, but surveying your families, so asking your guests from the open house for feedback, asking the student visitors, who shadowed to complete a very brief anonymous survey. It's helpful for you. It also lets them know, that their input is appreciated. We use forms on Final Site, and that's where we get our feedback from. I've used SurveyMonkey previously. That was a really effective tool as well. And then also in August, we survey our new families. So they've gone through the whole process. They've enrolled. They're part of our community. We'll ask them, so how was the experience for you applying to Trinity and then becoming a member of our family? Soup to nuts, scale of 1 to 10, how was it? We don't quite put it in that 1 to 10 terminology, but we do want to know a little bit in more detail their perspective on our accessibility as an office, on how informative they found our website, on how easy it was for them to go through those 3 steps of the user ID and password transition, things like that. So given some of that feedback, that influenced our initiatives, and some of our goals in terms of saying, this is, we just need to find a solution, to X, Y, or Z because we got feedback on this more than once, something like that. And then probably one of the more difficult things to do is to prioritize. So there are just so many very important things that happen pretty much all at the same time. I think a perfect example is probably something that you all have very personal stories about as well, but what I was mentioning earlier, just the month of January, the most interviews happen, at least for Trinity, in that month, and then having 3 full student shadow days with about 30 kids visiting each day, and 3 open house events, and 2 standardized testing, and 3 committee meetings, just in addition to, as I said, the contract revisions and things like that. So it all has to get done, and it all has to get done well, and it all has to get done on time. So even given all that, some things are more important than others. So knowing what needs to get done first and looking very honestly at your to-do list, and making sure that these things are brought up in meetings with your colleagues so that everybody is on the same page, everybody knows what everybody else is doing. You're a team and you pitch in and you help, no matter where the responsibilities necessarily fall. But during just such a very busy time, knowing how to help make sure that everybody is able to accomplish their own tasks. And then these are just some of the very specific tools that helped us realize our goals. So internally, we all tried Todoist, which is an online to-do list. It was moderately popular. I can say that we have all transitioned back to paper. I personally have always preferred pen and paper. I have a really great planner that I love, and I know Patty and Sherry have gone back to their original models as well. For our online reservations, I mentioned that we do use Final Site, which can be somewhat clunky. You can't personalize it quite as much as you would expect, I think. It's difficult to get school colors, logo, things like that. We really are very happy to have our application all online. That's been really great. We are completely electronic. We have no paper copies. Revising that, making changes, that process itself is a little cumbersome, but fortunately that doesn't really happen until around May. Dropbox is something that I used in particular. I created an online interactive digital map this fall of Trinity, which included photos and video and text, as well as a 3D rendering of the campus. And so I worked with 2 companies to facilitate that, and so we all used Dropbox, and that was really, really helpful because a lot of the files were just too large to email back and forth or to even share over Google Drive. So segueing into Google Drive and Google Tools, Trinity is completely using Google Apps and email as our platform. So Google Drive is where we save all of our candidate folders. Our committee members can access them at any time and go in there and look at any of the documents. We have to share them, so we can give them certain rights, and we share them with very specific people. For us, that's been wonderful, so we're not waiting for people to pass files around or anything like that. And there's really no loss of privacy unless there's a concern that a computer would be shared, or an email account. Really, it would need to be an email account that would be shared in order for there to be a concern like that. Reich is a to-do list, or it's more like a project management program that our director of marketing really likes. For the admission office, we haven't found it to be quite as helpful, probably just a little bit because she has very different types of projects that she's working on. So it's been really useful for her. But for us, we find that our internal shared calendar, our shared Office Drive on Google Drive, things like that has really been the most effective way for us to, stay on top of our projects. I have just a few takeaway questions for you, strategic questions. And this is courtesy of the Center for Strategic Planning in the NAIS publication, The Strategic Planning Process. So for mission, what is the mission of your admission office? Why do you exist? And these were all questions that we looked at when we were going through this process ourselves. Summary of status. Where is the current status of your department? Positive, negative, and challenges. Strategic issues and intentions. What are the strategic issues and intentions that we must address over the next 3 to 5 years? Goals. What must we accomplish in order to actualize our strategies and intentions? And then strategies, initiatives. What are our goals? What specific projects, programs, and activities will mobilize our strategies and lead us to our goals? And then performance outcomes. What is the evidence of success? So that is a very fluid, ongoing process. But those are some kind of specific jumping off starting points. So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. I hope this was helpful, and I will now take any questions if you have some.
Thank you, Katherine. That was great, really great information for us. Even though it is a busy time, we will be using this information, especially in our planning for the retreats that I'm sure many of us will have in our offices. But we do have a question. Peter is asking if you use a Google spreadsheet to track inquiries and applications, or are they uploaded to individual folders per candidate for each family? When they inquire, are they given a folder, and how do you manage that process?
That's a really great question. I would say that as much as we have enjoyed having Google Drive to share with our committee, none of us really like Google spreadsheets. we find that difficult to manipulate. Excel has a lot more functionality for us. We feel a little bit safer using it actually, because sometimes if you don't a certain way within a cell and then you toggle back and forth, the number will move around until you firmly place it in a cell. So for that reason, we don't really use the Google spreadsheet, but we do run reports. We use senior systems, so we do run reports right out of our enrollment management system. I'm sorry, and then the next question was, do we make this available to our committee, the inquiries? We only share completed application files with the members of our committee. So we have an internal Google Drive where we store, it's just sort of, per child, it's just a dump of everything that they have sent us. And we save that, and the three of us in the office are the ones the ones that can access it. We then have a polished folder that we create, and we'll then share that with the committee members. So that will have the pieces that they have to look at and consider, and it will be the final product. So we don't share anything until after the application deadline and until just prior to our committee meeting.
Great, thank you. Susan is asking if you can restate the source for your takeaway questions. I believe it was the NAIS book, but
yes.
also if you have a slide with those questions that you referenced. If not, perhaps we can add that into the materials that we link on our site as well after this session is over.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share it. I don't have a slide with it, but it was, and I hope I pronounced this last name correctly, it was, this is based on a contribution by Christina Druin from the Center for Strategic Planning in the NAIS publication, The Strategic Planning Process. And I'll be happy to, pass that along as well.
Yes, if Katherine passes that along to us, we'll be able to make that available to everyone on the admission.org site where we have the webinars listed. Great, and again, some thanks. People had to jump off, but thanks for your time and experience, and I echo that as well, that during this busy time that our audience was able to join us, that you were able to carve time out of your time at Trinity, where I know you're busy knee-deep in interviews and files, and present this information to us. I would like to remind everyone that our call for proposals is up on our website, admission.org, for anyone who is interested in creating a proposal for our annual meeting, which this next September will be held in Las Vegas. And a reminder that Katherine and her team at Trinity presented this information for us last year in Orlando and did a version of it today for us on the webinar. So we continue to use these resources and appreciate whenever those of you in the field share your information and your expertise with those of us in other areas. So thank you all. Thank you, Katherine. And a reminder again, this information and the additional resources that Katherine mentioned will be available on the webinar page in the professional development section of admission.org. Thanks again. I wish you all happy reading and have a wonderful day.